This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello and welcome to the Twilight Show. Thanks for joining me. It's the 1st of June 2024 and this is my 75th show for Teachers Talk Radio. Today my special guest is Emily Bryson and we'll be talking about minimal preparation teaching.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Twilight Show, everyone. I'm Graham Stanley speaking to you live from Mexico City. As I mentioned earlier on today's show, I'll be talking to Emily Bryson about minimal preparation teaching. Are you there, Emily? I think you are.
I think so. Am I?
Fantastic.
You're good.
Great. It all works. That's always good.
Yeah.
A good sign. Wonderful. So Emily is an ELT professional with over 20 years experience in the classroom. She's written various print and digital materials, including National Geographic Learning's Voices series, 50 Ways to Teach Life Skills and Pathways to Success, Visual Tools for Goal Setting, Self-Evaluation and Progression. She's passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion and the use of visual tools and graphic facilitation strategies to make learning more engaging, accessible, and fun. And she's a resident blogger for LE Learning and frequently delivers teacher development sessions for a variety of English language teaching organizations. Her teacher development courses with a visual twist have been described as the nicest corner of the internet, and her sketch notes are extremely popular on social media. You can find out about her at www.emilybrysonelt.com and follow her on Instagram, of course, Facebook, Twitter, or via LinkedIn. Not LinkedIn. I'll be talking to Emily about her work and more after the Teachers Talk Radio news.
Empowering education with Easy for You, where innovation meets accessibility. Our subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionizes the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. We're not just providing tools, we're shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy for You, transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easyforyou.school.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MAT leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the three-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
With the general election approaching, some political parties have already turned their attention to education. All major media outlets have covered Labour's plans to add VAT to private school fees and the Conservatives' comments on increasing apprenticeships by getting rid of rip-off degrees. However, the BBC features a story on proposals by the Lib Dems to increase taxes on social media giants as well as companies such as Amazon and Google. The revenue raised, the party says, would then be used to fund mental health professionals for all England state schools. The tax itself already exists and is known as the Digital Services Tax, but the Liberal Democrats say they would triple the amount the companies paid in it. Recent NHS statistics reported by the BBC show nearly 340,000 children and young people are currently on waiting lists to access mental health services in England. In response, the Conservatives said they'd already increased training places for mental health nurses, while Labour said it would put mental health support in every school. In Teesside, the BBC Tees news website reports on Nigerian students seeking help from a food charity. An economic crash in Nigeria has left international students at Teesside University struggling to afford tuition fees, with some even blocked from their studies and ordered to return home. The manager of Thornaby's Sprouts Community Food Charity spoke to BBC Local Radio and said 75% of their clients were now the struggling students and that it was at maximum capacity. The university itself said it was providing support and that international applicants must provide evidence of sufficient funds when applying for a student visa. Nigeria is currently experiencing its worst economic crisis in a generation. The value of its currency has been depreciating by more than 200% against the dollar. As a result, students at many UK universities have seen savings wiped out and budgets having to be significantly reduced. Some students at Teesside University have complained that the university's decision to change the payment plan and reduce instalments from 7 to 3 have exacerbated issues. The university is offering case-by-case support to those affected. In Northern Ireland, the TES reports that Education Minister Paul Givan has warned schools they must make school uniforms more affordable and that a price cap is being considered. He said the cost of uniform was an unnecessary burden on families by branded clothing and uniforms being available from only one supplier. Mr Givan said proposals due to go out for public consultation this spring will include strengthened guidance on the school uniforms. The decisions came in response to a motion in Stormont on making uniforms affordable. Mr Given said school uniforms create a sense of belonging to a school community, but that they should also act to ensure that pupils of all backgrounds feel welcome in the school. He went on to say that while many schools had followed current guidance around value for money, there are other schools which have not, and that this is not a situation which I am going to permit to continue. Further details on the proposals, which could also include the price cap, can be found in TES magazine online. Holiday prices feature in a Schools Week article on criticism faced by holiday company Butlins after it was accused of undermining schools' work to boost attendance. The criticism came after the company advertised term time breaks as great value getaways. The firm offers a 4-night midweek term time break for just under £20 per person, much cheaper than rates during school holidays. Schools Week reporters posed as parents and asked if the holidays were suitable for school-aged children, and were told all breaks are suitable for all ages. Ministers have pushed all year for schools to improve their attendance rates as persistent absence rates are nearly double pre-pandemic levels. Several multi-academy trust chief executives have commented that marketing holidays which specifically target term time is not civic-minded, but understood the attraction for families struggling to afford a family break, who are being exploited by the companies. Full details of the story are available on Schools Week's website. Finally, aposiopesis was the final word spelled correctly by 12-year-old Bruat Soma to win the 2024 Scripps National Spelling Bee in the USA. Soma takes home a $50,000 prize after spelling 29 words in 90 seconds and getting them all correct. For those of you who are curious, aposiopesis is a term used for the device of suddenly breaking off in speech. An example of this rhetorical device could be "get out or else," with the threat remaining unsaid. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Welcome back, everyone, and a welcome in particular to my special guest, Emily Bryson. Emily, thank you so much for joining me today. And I know you have been making me, and I'm sure everyone else who knows you, very envious, posting pictures of yourself in some of the most beautiful places in the Americas. So where in the world are you at the moment, and what have you been up to?
So at the moment, I am in Cordoba in Argentina, and we've been here for about 5 weeks or something. We're learning that if we travel and work at the same time, we want to be there for at least a month, because otherwise you don't get to see things, and you get severe FOMO when you're in a really cool place and you don't get to see the things in the local area.
Of course. Of course. I love Cordoba. It's a great wine growing region in Argentina, isn't it?
There's some really nice wine. There's really great food here, actually. Nice cheeses, and we've been enjoying
lots of hills around the city as well, isn't there? From what I remember.
Yes. So at the weekend, actually, we were in a town called Capilla del Monte, or Capilla del Monte, as they would say in Argentina, and it's a town where apparently there's been UFO spottings, but there's also some really beautiful mountains to climb. So I got to scratch my mountain climbing itch and do some hiking, which was lovely.
Fantastic. Did you see any UFOs?
I didn't see any UFOs. I saw a lot of plastic aliens. And I did make quite a funny video for my nephews and niece about me going alien spotting, which I won't be putting on social media because it's far too cheesy, but it's appreciated by my nephews and niece.
Fantastic. And so how long have you been in Argentina? You were at Iguazu, the waterfalls, before that. Was that right?
Yes. So we arrived in Argentina maybe, I don't know, 3-4 months ago. So we were in Bariloche for a month, which I absolutely loved because there was lots of hiking to do there. That was like my ideal paradise town. Finish work and then go climb just go for an amazing walk. And then we were in Mendoza for a month, so there was lots of cycling to wineries there, which was great.
Yes,
yeah,
of course. Actually, it wasn't Cordoba that I was thinking of was the great wine place. It was Mendoza. So
yeah. There's not so many wineries. There are wineries in Cordoba, and we have been drinking Cordoban wine. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
And Bariloche, what did you think of Bariloche? I thought it was like the Lake District, but like to the power of 10. So the lakes were 10 times bigger than you find in the Lake District in the northwest of the UK.
Quite, I guess, like northern Italy, or like the Alps in Europe, I suppose, that kind of area. Super blue lakes and super green mountains, and it just, every hike that I went on just seemed to have something really unique about it, which was just amazing. Like really weird, some rock formations that were just really spectacular.
Fabulous. And then the city itself is a bit like a Swiss village rather than an Argentinian village, isn't it?
Yeah, and lots of chocolate shops there, which we enjoyed, obviously. and lots of cervecerias, lots of artisanal beer.
That's right.
We were there in 2006 on our first visit to South America, and back then we were just drinking Quilmes beer, and now every city's got so many breweries. It's amazing. So much local beer to try.
local craft beer
Yeah.
across the Americas has exploded. The same is true in Mexico, and I know in Uruguay as well. So I think it must be everywhere.
And you went to that restaurant, I saw on your social media, you went to the street food place in Mexico City and had Michelin-starred tacos, was it?
No, I didn't go to that one. That so the Michelin star sort of street food taco place now has about a 2-hour wait for a taco
Really, does it? Okay.
because of the publicity. But the good thing about the listing that they recently published is that they have sort of Michelin star restaurants, of which there are quite a few in Mexico and a couple in Mexico City. Michelin bib restaurants, which is the next category down from the star, I think, and then recommended places. And I went to one of the recommended places. The list of recommended places are always really worth checking out because they're normally cheaper. Not, of course, the taco place, which is pretty cheap, but they're normally cheaper than the restaurants that are listed. And the value for money, the food is extraordinary. And I went to one of those taco places that has like Southeast Asia tacos on the streets. It's just a little street selling place, hole in the wall, basically, but it's absolutely delicious.
Amazing. I loved the food in Mexico when we were there.
Yeah.
One of my
Well,
favorite.
you'll have to come back.
I think I will have to come back. So yeah. Our plan is we're going to Chile to meet our Brian, my husband's brother-in-law, and then we're going to have a holiday with him, and then we're going to head north into Peru, and then meet some friends in Colombia in September, end of September, and then keep heading north to avoid the Scottish summer, and then probably back in Scotland when the weather gets better next summer. And then probably try and escape again to somewhere else for Scottish winter. Try to avoid Scottish winter at all costs.
Fantastic. Peru is a place I would love to explore more. I've only been to the usual places, Lima, Machu Picchu, Cusco, but there's so much to explore in Peru. I'm very envious of that.
Yeah, I'd love to find the Bariloche of Peru. So if anybody's listening and has tips for towns in Peru that I can do lots of hiking when I finish work, please message me on socials. I'd love to hear from you.
I have colleagues from Peru, so they'll be able to help you. I'll ask them and let you know. So anyway, we are not here to talk about your travels, much as I'm very interested in hearing about it. But I would love to start by hearing about how you became involved in education, how you became a teacher, Emily.
Okay. So I guess my first dabbles with teaching were in 2001. I went to a Polish summer camp, and I taught kids, kind of teenagers, I suppose, in a Polish summer camp for 4 weeks. In between I think it was maybe first and second year at university. And then when I finished university, I went to South Korea and I taught in South Korea. So children maybe from 3 to 14 there for a year. And then I went traveling around South America, and I came back and did my CELTA course and then started teaching at what is now City of Glasgow College, which is the largest college in Scotland.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
And then I got into the materials writing and all the other sideline things while I was teaching at City of Glasgow College.
So did you always think about trying to or wanting to combine traveling with teaching and materials writing, etc.?
So our plan, so after South Korea, being there for a year, then my husband and I, who wasn't my husband at the time, but we went traveling around South America for a year. And our plan was to go back to Glasgow, save up some money, and then go traveling again. But what happened was life, and I ended up with a permanent job and a mortgage and all the things that you normally end up with in your late 20s, early 30s. And we ended up being in Glasgow for about 16 years. And then last year, about November-ish time, the college were looking to make were offering voluntary severance packages. So I thought that was the moment that I've been waiting for. So I took the opportunity, and now we're here doing what we were meant to do 16 years ago. So
Wow.
and I guess I could have done that. I did that. I had the opportunity to do that because I was also a freelancer doing writing, doing sketchnoting, all my other freelance remote work hats that I can do whilst traveling, which is great.
So you've become a digital nomad, Emily, haven't you?
Yeah, I guess. I can't quite get my head around that term. It just seems a little bit too cool. So I keep saying very long-winded, we're traveling whilst working, but maybe over time, I also feel like I've not been traveling long enough to be a digital nomad. But yeah, I guess I'm getting my
I
head
think
around it.
I think you definitely classify. You definitely
Yeah,
classify.
okay. 'Cause it's been 6 months now, and we'll be
Yeah.
planning. It'll be a year and a half, I think, by the time we get back to Scotland. So yeah.
And when you get back, is the idea to settle down again, or have you not worked it out yet?
Maybe to find a way to spend summer in Scotland, or in Europe at least, and then the other 6 months when the weather is awful in Scotland, somewhere nice with good weather. It's really
Yeah.
dark. Like it gets dark in Scotland at 3 in the afternoon, and it's cold, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I've kind of forgotten that.
yeah,
But I do have a rude awakening every time I go back, for example, to
yeah,
the UK when it isn't nice weather.
yeah. But I do miss the 10 o'clock nights, like of daylight. Those are
Yeah.
brilliant in Scotland. Dark,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so light forever, which is great.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So the focus of the show today is on minimal preparation teaching.
Yeah.
And I would love to find out what makes that of interest to you, and if you could give us a couple of ideas of what you understand to be minimal preparation teaching, Emily.
Okay. So I guess minimal preparation teaching is everybody's holy grail, isn't it? Because as teachers, we're busy, we have a lot to think about, we've got marking to do, we've got lives to have. And so minimal preparation activities are ways to save us time. And I think they come a lot with experience. Like the more you learn different activities that you can do in class, you just know to do them instinctively. So there's obviously the dogme approach, which is go into class completely not unprepared and talk to students and see where the class takes you. That obviously
Yeah,
takes a bit of experience.
let's just
Um,
pause there, just in case there are any listeners out there who haven't heard of this. Could you explain a little bit more behind that approach, the dogme approach? Where did it
okay.
come?
Oh, where did it come from? Wasn't it?
I think it was
Was
Scott
it Scott Thornbury
Thornbury
that came up with it? Yeah.
and Luke Meddings.
Yes, you're right. That's the one.
And I think it was based on is it the Danish filmmaker or the Danish filmmaking school that basically they, back in the 90s, here my memory's a bit sketchy, but I think they had this idea of no lighting, and very minimal kind of filmmaking that didn't require a big production team or a lot of preparation and stuff. And they just sort of, the idea was to minimal storytelling and quite honest reactions from people. I think that's where it came from.
Okay. And so kind of like improv
I
drama
think
in a way.
I think it was definitely scripted, but there were things like you didn't have you didn't have any music unless it was actually happening as part of the background. So there was no sort of artificial filmmaking techniques. There wasn't like a music to start the film with, or kind of dramatic music. The same with lighting. I think it wasn't. You weren't supposed to sort of. You were supposed to use the natural lighting of the setting, things like that. The idea, I think, was just to get filmmaking back to basics, which is where I think Dogme ELT took its inspiration from.
Ah, that's interesting. I didn't realize that. Yeah, my interpretation of dogma is basically going into class without any structural plan necessarily, and
Yeah.
seeing where the class takes you, really, by talking to them, by maybe writing any words or interesting phrases that they've said down on the board, and then exploiting all of those things into various different activities.
Exactly. It's all about it's all about the focus is on the people in the room rather than you going into class with an idea to teach materials to someone and not sort of prioritizing what their needs are, what they need language for.
Yeah, it's all very learner-centered, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is perfect, really, because that's what the main focus of all our teaching is the learner. So
definitely should be.
Yeah. But I never felt very comfortable going into class entirely unprepared. I always liked having, whether it was a worksheet or a reading activity or a listening task or even just a vague plan. And I think over time, like when I was doing my diploma, I think a lot of the diploma is learning how to exploit the materials that you've got, or like a small, like by, for example, playing a video with the sound on, playing it with the sound off, pausing it, asking students to describe it, doing activities like what happens after, what happened before, doing extra activities like role plays, then vocabulary games, maybe getting them to look at the grammar and then ask a question or say a sentence with it. Like all those kind of exploitation activities that I think we learn intuitively over time as teachers.
Yes.
And yeah, I think that's what the diploma is all about, really, is learning how to exploit.
Yeah, and I think it's also that giving you the confidence to be able to kind of not stick rigidly to a pre-prepared plan and to follow the needs and interests of the learners. And if something does come up, to be able to exploit it in a way that makes it valuable. Because I think it's always the danger, isn't it? As a teacher, you think, well, I've got to make this worthwhile for the students.
Yeah.
And where dogme ELT, for example, can go wrong is if you just go in and talk to the students about anything they want or whatever comes up without really thinking about what they need to know.
Yeah, that's true. So you can go in with, for example, a lesson plan or an idea with what they need to know, and then still let your teaching or your class go wherever it ends up organically based on their needs and knowing the students and responding to them. And if they get super passionate about a specific topic, you can roll with that because they're interested in it.
Yeah. So can you think of an example of where that's happened to you when you've been teaching and you've kind of abandoned the plan or you've definitely adapted it?
I think I over time, I think I kind of always abandoned the plan. Like, especially in my ESOL literacy class. So I taught learners from refugee backgrounds at City of Glasgow College.
Yeah.
And a lot of the learners didn't have hadn't maybe had educational opportunities in their home country. So when they came to Scotland, we're also learning, for example, Arabic or Kurdish Sorani, or from like maybe their own script, how to read and write in their own script as well as in English. So a lot of the time I would go into class with, for example, handwriting worksheets, short texts, and I would start off using maybe one worksheet or one reading activity, very simple reading activity, or get them to like write some words down, and then that would just snowball into some other activities over time. So I would go in with, for example, 5 activities that I thought that would benefit them, but I would come back out with 4 of those activities that I could use in the other class because I hadn't actually got round to doing the other things because I'd done all these other activities. Like, for example, I would do one worksheet and then have, for example, role plays or create dialogues or all sorts of different activities. Create picture dictionaries.
I
And have
imagine,
them all working on different things at different times as well, based on their needs, because some of them
of course.
did know the alphabet well, and then others were still learning it. So you did have to have them all at different levels and stages throughout.
So a lot of differentiation in the class then.
Yeah, lots of differentiation. And I guess that's the good thing about being kind of organic and minimal about your prep in a way, is that you can let it flow and let students work on what they particularly need.
Hmm. So what about for a teacher who was thinking, oh, I'd like to have a few more sort of things up my sleeve when it comes to middle prep ideas. What kind of things? I think you've mentioned a couple already in passing, but what kind of things do you think is really good for teachers to kind of have in mind that they can do always if they need to?
Okay, so one of the things that, well, I've got really into graphic facilitation over the last, I don't know, 5 or
Yes.
6 years maybe. So graphic facilitation is using mostly hand-drawn images, very, very simple ones, like almost stickmen kind of images, and a lot of visual metaphors, lots of visual imagery, um, and those activities can be used and reused and repurposed. So, for example, my book that I've just released is called Pathways to Success, Visual
Hmm.
Tools for Goal Setting, Self-Evaluation and Progression. And those visual tools, I've included teachers' notes for each of those templates. But when I was writing them, the difficulty with writing them is that I have actually used every single template in multiple different ways. Like I've used them in webinars, when I'm doing teacher training sessions, I've used them with low-level literacy learners, used them with intermediate students, I've used them with myself when I'm planning my own business and strategies and things like that.
Yeah.
Because there's no words on them, they're just images. So
Yeah.
for me, images are a great way to um, to save you preparation time. Like for example, one of them is a mountain and
Hmm.
with a hot air balloon next to it. And it's a really
Yeah.
simple drawing. It's really quite colourful, it's fun. And I created it originally for a action research project that I was mentoring. And my mentee was looking for ways to discuss with her students who were also from refugee backgrounds and had quite a lot of mental health issues, ways for them to explore and share what their mental health challenges were, but without being kind of desensitizing it. And I think the visual and the colourfulness and the brightness of it did desensitize it. So basically, the mountain represents challenges. So they can write
Hmm.
inside the mountain, what mental health challenges do you have? At the top of the mountain, they could put maybe their goal, where they want to be. And then in the hot air balloon, they write what do you enjoy doing that's going to lift you up and over your challenges. So these are what we would call in graphic facilitation as containers. So a container is basically a large icon or large hand-drawn icon. So for example, a large mountain with enough space for somebody to draw inside it or write inside it, or a large hot air balloon so people can write inside the balloon. And so those containers make up a visual template, which is kind of like a graphic organizer, I would say. But I think the difference is that there's a visual metaphor in it. So there's a story, a bit of a visual story behind the mountain, for example, or the hot air balloon, for example.
Hmm.
And so I've used that template for talking about mental health. I've used that template to help my students. I used it in class for helping my students see how far they'd come throughout the year.
Yeah.
I've used it also for planning where they want to go in the future. And I've used it for my own business as well. What are my problems at the moment? Where do I want to be? How am I going to lift myself up and over that? There's a whole load
Yeah.
of different ways and lots of different grammar you can get out of it. Lots of, like, for example, I want to be, I will be, I like. These things weigh me down, these things put me up, lots of different grammar and language that you can get, lots of emergent language from it.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things I really like about the graphic facilitation that you do is that a lot of teachers think, well, oh, I can't draw. I don't know if that would work for me. But I think you're very much proposing teachers use quite simple graphics, that they don't need to be very complicated. You don't need to be able to draw something very difficult or try to be sophisticated with the drawings in a lot of sense. I mean, everyone can draw mountain, and everyone can draw a hot air balloon, really, I think. Is that the case?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not, one of my mantras is it's not art, it's communication. And the other one is feel the fear and draw anyway. Because so the drawing alphabet is basically a circle, square, triangle, line, squiggly line, maybe some letters. And for example, you're talking about the mountain is basically a triangle or like an upside down V shape, and everybody can draw a V. If you just put the V upside down, then that's your mountain.
Exactly.
And then the hot air balloon is a circle with a rectangle underneath it. And then you can maybe put some little M shapes to distinguish between and a couple of lines to show the ropes. It's easier when you can draw it and demonstrate it. But I think, and like, for example, you can draw people by just doing an N with a little O on top. It can, a lot of drawing is basically, or visual communication is giving the idea of something as simply as possible. Like if you look around, it's all based on international iconography. So like if you walk around an airport or a large building, you'll see lots of signs that all use really simple icons. Even like on Zoom, for example, the camera on Zoom is basically a square with a little triangle next to it. And the microphone's like a kind of oval with a little upside down, with a U and then an upside down T.
So how did you get interested in graphic facilitation? When did it sort of happen over a long period of time, or did you immediately have a kind of eureka moment?
I think so. I was on secondment at the Scottish Refugee Council, and when I was there, their trainer used a lot of graphic facilitation techniques. I didn't realise that that's what she was doing at the time, but they were really cool techniques. So like the feedback fairy, which some people might know, I've got a blog post about it on my website, and that was one of her activities that she did. And
so explain more about the feedback fairy, because that's a new one to me. I'll need to read your blog post, but let's hear about it.
So the feedback fairy, so I don't know how do you feel when somebody sends you a link to fill in a feedback form? Are you excited by
it? I see it as a necessary thing I need to do as part of my job or as part of the experience, because I ask people to do that, so I can't complain about people doing it. But what I definitely do is try to keep them very short. Yeah.
And then maybe at the end of a workshop or a webinar, we're quite often hit with a paper form that has some tick boxes and then some writing. But the feedback fairy is a way of making that interactive and fun. So basically, if you go to my website, you'll see how to draw this. And actually, I've got a much simpler way to draw it. That was how I drew it many years ago. And now I've got a much simpler way to do it. So I do need to post that at some point. But basically, it's a fairy, like more or less a stick person type fairy. There's the heart to say, what did you love about the session? So these are all containers, like big icons that you can draw on a flip chart, and people can add their ideas using Post-it notes at the end of maybe a workshop. And if you're doing it online, you could get them you can use like Canva whiteboard and use the Post-it notes in Canva whiteboard so people can add their ideas, or use the annotation tools in Zoom so people can add their ideas. But basically, there's the heart, which is things that you loved. The fairy is holding a magic wand. That's for something that you would wish for. Above the fairy, there's a thought cloud, something that made you think, or a key takeaway. She or he or they are holding a toolkit, which is things like tools or resources maybe that you can take with you from the training session. And what else is there? There's something else. There's something else missing in that. You'll need to read my blog to see all of it.
Good. Excellent.
But yeah, it's just a different, more interactive and fun way of getting feedback, really.
So that was the moment you saw that being used, and that's when you thought, this is interesting. Yeah.
Exactly. And then when I went back to the college after my secondment, a graphic facilitator came to the college and showed us some really cool, super simple ways to draw things. Because I was teaching ESOL literacy at the time, lots of my learners don't have script in their first language, so they can't take notes, they can't write translations. But if they can copy a little doodle, which a lot of them could do, and I got them all doing that, then they have something to study from at home. But it also is a way of making them understand more. So if you imagine a whiteboard full of words, and then you imagine a whiteboard full of words and pictures, it's quite obvious which one's the most accessible, engaging, fun, understandable, etc. So yeah, I got really hooked after that. And then I think I've done maybe 3, 4, 5. I've taken 3, 4, 5, maybe different graphic facilitation and graphic recording courses since then.
Right. Is it something that is becoming a lot more popular?
I think so. I don't know if it's because of my echo chamber on social media, but I definitely see a lot more sketch notes and visuals now.
I know my brother talks about it. He started around the time when I noticed that you were doing it in education. He
Okay.
started talking about other people that he'd come across doing it in business.
Yeah, it's big in business. Like I think places like Google, Microsoft, I think a lot of those companies actually have graphic facilitators that they pay a salary, not just somebody that will come in to do a session. So yeah, like they use them for like meeting facilitation, strategic planning, lots of things like that.
And then the other thing that that you do is when you attend an event or go, attend someone's talk, etc., you are very good at producing a kind of graphic, visual memory of that with key phrases on, and it becomes like a really good record of what the speaker was talking about, doesn't it? And that I think is really effective because it seems to be much more effective than just taking notes.
Yeah. So for me, at school, my school reports would quite frequently say Emily would be a really great student if she would stop staring out the window. And I wished, and I carried that daydreaming forward into conferences in my adult years, and then found sketchnoting, and my focus has just changed so much. I take it all in now, and I draw it out, and not only that, but I look at my sketch notes again. Like before, my notes would just be saved on my phone or on a scrap of paper or in a notebook that I never opened again. But now when I sketch note, I look at them again, and I can actually have a visual memory of what was in that session. Oh, that session had, for example, John Hughes' sketch notes just come up. I did a session at IATEFL about creativity, and I drew like seven steps to creativity. So I drew like a little step for each one, and that always comes into my head. So yeah, but that's actually, sketchnoting is actually graphic recording. So there's a difference between graphic facilitation and graphic recording. Graphic facilitation is, I guess, using visual templates, visual tools, simple drawings in, for example, a classroom or a meeting to facilitate a session. Whereas graphic recording is taking visual notes, using those simple drawing techniques. And the beauty of visual notes is they're very shareable on social media. They simplify complex information. They make things like webinars and conferences immortal, because my sketch notes go round on socials. I've got them all on a loop, so people see them again and again and again. So I've got some sketch notes from the B-Belt conference a couple of years ago and from IATEFL a couple of years ago, and they just go round and round on a loop. So
Yes. But
which makes them immortal, because the YouTube videos are harder to share, for example, and not everything's always recorded like that.
Of course. One of the things I think is really great about this type of recording of a workshop, for example, is that you can very easily see, by looking at a one-page or one sort of image sketch note, the basics of the talk, for example. So either if you don't have time to watch the talk, you've at least got the kind of the
Important
basics
points.
there. You can actually decide when you see that whether you think watching the whole hour's talk, for example, would be of value to you. But also, if you have already watched it, it jogs your memory. And so it's a lot of really good things. I suppose that kind of visual representation or recording of a workshop, whatever, could also work for students to do in class, couldn't it? Have you ever sort of experimented with that, encouraging students to do this?
So over time, so when I first got into graphic facilitation, I would really encourage my students to draw. And some of them got really into it, and some of them just weren't so keen. And I think that's very normal. Lots of people just aren't keen at drawing for various different reasons. And then one year I decided I'm not going to tell any of my students to draw. I'm just going to draw in class, and I'm going to see what happens. So in a way, it was kind of non-action research. But what I found was that my students, or some of my students, just started copying my doodles anyway over time. And so their notebooks would have lots of doodles in them. And I'd also start laying things out on the whiteboard in a way that they could copy that into their notebooks if they wanted. If they particularly asked for me to draw something again, I would draw it again too. Yeah, so there's lots of research to show that sketchnoting can really help students, and especially I think neurodiverse students, like students with dyslexia, for example, can be quite visual and quite very creative, and also having those visual cues and visual markers, such as a simple drawing, can really help them. Same with students with ADHD who maybe are a bit hyperactive and wanting something to do. Drawing can be a great way to fidget and help them to focus and to listen. Obviously, not for every single student, because it depends on the learner, but it is great for different students what will work. And it will help them look at their notes again, hopefully, because if you think of a notebook that's just full of boring pages, and then you get to the notebook where there's a sketch note, it's pretty obvious which one you're going to stop at.
Yes, it makes it more interesting if there are drawings or at least something breaking up the pages and pages of notes.
Yeah.
So what about camera phones, Emily? Have you ever found the sort of temptation of students just to snap one of what was on the board or one of your
I'm perfectly happy for them to do that. I think I'm okay with them doing that.
Presumably, they wouldn't learn as much as if they were reproducing the doodles.
Yes, but I guess if they take a photo and then go and copy it, if you encourage them to copy it, then that would be probably better, wouldn't it? But yeah, I had the luxury at City of Glasgow College of having a whiteboard that was basically the entire size of the wall. They called it a wonder wall, and so you could use it for drawing on. And then there was another whiteboard at the side, which for some reason none of the other teachers used. So I just kind of commandeered this, and we created a giant phonics spelling wall, like a huge mind map or category, big table chart with lots of different sounds, spellings, that kind of thing
Wow.
on it. And the students took that home and they copied it into their picture dictionaries. We took photos of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I definitely think it's that kind of thing. I think anyone who's just taking a picture of notes on a board, whether it's of drawings or words, they're probably not getting as much out of it than someone who's actually writing notes or doing their
yeah,
own drawings, because it's the act of actually creating something yourself that
exactly.
helps you remember it. I think. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know when I go to a talk at a conference, I know if I just sit and listen to the talk, I'm not going to remember as much than if I'm sitting actually writing some notes. I mean, in my case,
yeah,
I've never been brave enough to try sketchnoting. I should, but definitely writing notes helps me remember the key points. It's almost like I'm trying to distill whatever the speaker's saying, or any class really, and trying
yeah,
to capture the most important ideas.
yeah. So yeah, it's another note-taking skill that students can take away with them and
Yeah,
add to their study skills toolkit, really.
yeah. So
Yeah,
apart
I
from
think it's a superpower, to be honest.
definitely, I'm fascinated with it, and
Yeah,
I think it's fantastic. We kind of moved away from this minimal preparation
we
teaching.
did. We did.
So to bring things back, what apart from kind of your suggestion of using graphic facilitation to help with that,
Yeah.
are there any other
So,
ideas you have
well,
related
like for
to?
example, the feedback fairy that I was talking about, that's minimal preparation because if you've remembered it, it's in your head. You know that you need to draw a little fairy with a heart and a toolkit and a thought cloud and a wand. Then that's an activity right there that's minimal preparation. All you need to do is draw it. The same with that balloon mountain. If you know how to draw an upside down V for a mountain and a balloon out of a rectangle and a circle, then that's your minimal preparation activity as well.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then obviously you can exploit all those activities like we talked about. Like for example, doing role plays afterwards, getting them to write it, getting them to do question and answers, all those kind of things. The other activity that is minimal preparation that is really great is drawing round hands. So last year when I was at
Okay.
IATEFL, I was speaking at the Hands Up Project conference,
Oh
and
yes.
I was sharing an activity that Effie Tsuri had shared with me and was actually one of Anna Maria Pinter's activities, which was about an identity text. So you get your
Hmm.
students to draw around their hands and then add information about themselves within it. Like, for example, their name, their family, something they like. And that, when I shared that activity, there was a real buzz in the room because everybody came up with an idea saying, oh, I've done that with class, but I've done it, for example, a recipe, or I've done it for drawing an animal or your favorite things, that kind of thing. And so we came up with this idea that we would create a book of activities. So we created a book of activities for the Hands Up project. So all proceeds go to the Hands Up project, who provide education for children in Palestine.
Hmm.
And the book is brilliant. It's just full of lots of activities for using drawing round hands or hand idioms or the theme of hands. It's really cool and very minimal preparation again.
So what can you share one of your favorite activities related to drawing round hands, something that you think can be used very easily by teachers?
Okay, so my activity. So this book is a collaboration of 16 different ELT English language teaching professionals.
Yeah.
And the activity that I put in was about phonics.
Yeah.
So students draw around their hands, they choose a sound, for example, SH for sh, or CH for ch, or OO for oo, and then in each of the hands they write 5 different words. Or if you get them to draw around 2 hands, then it can be an extra challenge for them because they can draw 10 words. And so they write 10 different words in each of the fingers, and maybe add a doodle, maybe add a definition, maybe add some a sentence or an example, and then pin it to the wall, and you can share it. My classroom at the college had just a whole wall of drawn round hands with different phonics sounds on them. And if you get students to choose a different sound, then they can remind each other of what they've learned throughout the year and all the different sounds they've learned. So that's just one example. All the rest, you'll need to buy the book and contribute to the Hands Up project.
Fantastic. That's great. I've just remembered a minimal prep teaching idea that I have that works just as well for workshops, etc. So this is really good and very easy to do when you have something that is a problem, for example, an issue, a problem, and you are talking about, I don't know, for example, anything that comes up in class, really, you can do it. And you divide the divided class into two groups. You divide the board into two, and the first side of the board you have as prevention, or prevention, and then the second side of the board you have as solution. So in other words, anything you can think of that could be a problem. For example, not doing your homework on time, or anything really. It could be related to study or it's a very flexible activity. And then you hand out bits of paper to the students and to collect the problems, and then you read them out, the ones that you think are most useful. And one half of the class comes up with ideas of how to prevent the problem from happening. So if the next time, it's not going to happen because you do this. So in other words, you don't do homework because you don't have any time. So in other words, you start your homework directly after class, for example. And the other side of the class, the other group, comes up with a solution. And it could be the solution is the teachers should give us less homework.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you read out the ideas, and then you have a discussion, and you give points to the group that has either the best prevention or the best solution.
Yeah.
And
nice.
that ends up being a kind of discussion or debate and stuff. And I've used that so many times because that is like a really easy thing you can pretty much apply to anything where there's a kind of list of problems or whatever.
Yeah, and you can get so much out of that from analysing the language within those problems, analysing the solutions.
Yeah.
Doing role plays of what the problem is between the characters within that problem.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things I like about it is that although it's framed as being quite competitive, as in you have one group coming up with things to prevent the problem and another group coming up with things to solve the problem, and you have the final say as the teacher of which of the ideas is best, whether it's prevention or solution. But you encourage the students, to argue their case based on evidence rather than based on this is an idea from my group. So it encourages the students to use kind of logic and evidence to support arguments during a discussion or debate, rather than this is what I think because this is my friend, or he's on my team or she's on my team, etc. Which I think is quite an interesting thing for students to do as well.
Yeah, it's great for critical thinking skills, for creativity, and for politely giving your opinion and accepting other people's opinions, or responding to other people's opinions as well. Yeah, nice.
Definitely. So do you have any other things that you do with classes that we haven't already talked about?
So the language experience approach.
Hmm.
Have you heard of it?
I'm not sure I have.
It's more of a literacy teaching approach, and it's based on, but I think you can use it with any class anywhere, really. So it's based on having a shared experience. So, for example, going on a class trip, but in class, in reality, you don't often get every opportunity for going on that kind of experience. So, quite often
Yeah.
in class, I would not do the experience part of it, but just have the language. So basically, you elicit a text from the students, maybe one sentence each, or even one word each, or get them to
Hmm.
write a kind of shared story, and you write it up on the whiteboard, and then you read it out, and then you get the students to read it out chorally, and then you get maybe the students to work in pairs to read it out. You could get them to copy it down. You can ask them comprehension questions on it. You can erase words and get them to change it. So, for example, if they'd said, yesterday I got a pet dog, you could change it, erase it, and say, yesterday I got a pet cat, for example. You could if you type it up on the computer, you could cut it up and get students to put it back in order. So basically, it comes down to creating a shared text as a class and then exploiting it in all the millions of different ways that we've already talked about that you can exploit a text or exploit a role play or a video or a photo or a visual template, for example. But yeah, the language experience approach is fabulous. I love it.
That sounds really good. I can see how that could be used at any level of student, any topic, which is
Yeah.
always great, isn't it? If you can find an activity that you can use with any class with minimal preparation, that's always a joy as a teacher. I think.
Yeah. And I think with the language experience approach, you can have the focus on literacy if you want to. The intention was originally, I think, for focusing on literacy, but I think you don't need to. So, for example, you could focus more on the spelling and taking words apart and getting them to spell them, or capital letters, lowercase, maybe handwriting, that kind of thing. But you can do it for all sorts of different classes, all sorts of levels. You could elicit a problem from them as part of the experience, similar to what you were talking about. If you were teaching, for example, a business class, elicit
Of
a
course.
problem and then exploit that problem in different ways.
Yeah. It reminds me of, I don't know where this idea originates, but it's something that I used to use a lot in classes, is that you have a very simple sentence. So you elicit a very simple sentence from the students, which you put on the board, and then you ask the students to expand upon it. And they can either go up to the board and write. They add one word to the sentence, and they keep adding a word to make it a more complex sentence. Or you can ask them it doesn't have to be one sentence, it could be a story. So you start off with, I don't know, I walked into school. And the next person might come up with, today I walked into school. Someone else might come up with, today it was a beautiful day and I walked into school. You don't have to, they could add more than one word, etc. Or they can continue, and you can ask them either to expand upon the sentence or to add another sentence, etc. And then you end up with a sort of class-generated text that can often be quite funny. And you also can award, if you want to gamify it, for example, you can award points for the other students if they spot mistakes in any of the language, etc. So I think that's quite a nice one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a great one. And again, you can do what happened next, write a dialogue between two of the characters, act out that dialogue.
Yeah, it lends itself into role play, doesn't it? So whatever the situation is, you can either have, say, what happened before, what happened next, acted
Yeah.
out, and then as a follow-up activity, you could get them to write it as a different genre. So you could write this as a newspaper report or
Yeah,
the
nice.
screenplay for TV,
Yeah,
etc.
turn it into an email, make it formal, make it informal.
Yeah, I think the key to that, the success of that one, for example, is definitely the idea of using the students to generate the language, because they're going to write whatever they'll write at the level that they have. So the capacity that they have to generate language, they'll write at that level. You're also testing them because you're asking them to make the structures or the sentences more complicated. So adding adjectives, adverbs, details is the obvious thing there. And it's also going to be, they'll come up with things that are of interest to them and relevant to them.
Yeah, that's the beauty of learner-generated text, isn't it? It's something that's going to interest them, and it'll be at the level that they require as well.
Yeah.
Which is also one of the reasons why I love using visual templates and visuals so much, because I've used that same, for example, balloon mountain template with complete beginners as well as proficient language users in teacher training sessions. So,
Of
yeah,
course.
lots of these minimal preparation activities can be so adapted to mixed ability classes or to using with lots of different levels.
What about
Flexibility is the key.
Definitely. What about flashcards, Emily?
Oh,
Have you
yeah.
ever used
So
flashcards
many
for
activities for
activities?
flashcards. I've actually got a blog post for Ellie.com about using flashcards. They've got 5,000 flashcards in their library of flashcards, which is incredible. Yeah, I use flashcards a lot, especially with the lower level learners, because you can get a story with, you could start off with a flashcard and then get a story out of it. Use like maybe 10 flashcards, put them in order, and get students to create their own story from it, either by themselves or in pairs or in groups.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the idea of randomly giving, if you have a sort of pack of flashcards for the class, for example, or you've chosen things that they know because you've been working on that vocabulary, then hand out to groups of students or pairs of students a kind of 5 flashcards, and they have the opportunity to swap, for example, 2 of them. And then with 5 flashcards they have to create a story with those 5 flashcards.
Yeah.
And then you can actually, they have to say the story in the class, and the class can vote on the best story, or they say the stories, and then you ask them to write the stories in more kind of detail afterwards. So that's quite a nice activity.
Nice. And they're great for just vocabulary practice as well. And adding to picture dictionaries or creating a wall of flashcards on the room.
And what about another thing I thought, which I think would be quite interesting, is your visuals that you produce. Have you ever thought about animating them?
Ooh, I haven't. I've got some live drawing demonstration. Actually, well, it depends what you say about animating. I've got on my website under the freebies section a nice little story. I'm not really sure if this counts as animation, but it's a guy called Stan. So if anybody's familiar with teaching phonics, the first 6 sounds that you teach are s, a, t, p, n, I, because they're high frequency, they're quite simple, so you can get words like n, I, t, and n, a, p, nap, and s, I, t, sit. So this story basically uses words that have this a, t, p, n, I words in them. And I've hand drawn this little story about Stan putting pasta, put at, st, a, in a pan, put at, and I read it out this story, and I draw it at the same time. And then from that, there's lots of other little activities. And I've put the activities in a Word document because I feel like ESOL literacy teachers and low-level teachers need to adapt all the resources to the needs of the learner. But yeah, that's kind of an animation. And I've created GIFs as well. So my course in graphic facilitation for English language teachers, there's a module in it about creating GIFs for teachers. That's more about...
That's
really
not
so much about animation though, but you could use the GIF methods for animating in that way.
That's really interesting. How do you use GIFs? How do you how do you propose that teachers use GIFs?
So partly during the pandemic, we were sharing a lot of videos, and my students didn't have very much data at the time. And videos eat data really quickly. GIFs, on the other hand, do not. So you can share images. So it could be, like, for example, one of the GIFs I've made is about grammar. So it's like different uses for present simple. So there's an icon with a train for the train leaves at 8 o'clock, for example. There's an icon of maybe a toothbrush or something, like I brush my teeth every day, something like that. And so just 5 different uses that pop up, and a little picture to describe them.
How do you approach the creation of a GIF? Do you need sort of several different static images that you put together using a program or a website? Or how do you do it?
Basically, static images. So you can actually, on PowerPoint, if you go to Save As, you can save your PowerPoints as JPEG files, which are image files.
Yeah.
And then you can upload them to, I use a GIF maker. There's lots of online GIF makers. So you upload 5 different files, 5 different images, or however many images. And then,
which is the one that you recommend using?
The one I use is, I can't remember if it's EZ, like 2 letters, EZ, like easy, but EZ. GIF maker. I can't remember if it's .com or .org, or it generally comes up in the search engine when I search for it, and then I know what it looks like.
Got it. Just look for it. It's ezgif.com. All right. That's why do you like that one? Is it just easy to use, or
it's just really easy to use? You can upload it, and you can also change the speed. And something to be aware of when you're making GIFs is that if they're too fast, they can actually trigger epileptic fits.
Oh.
So they need to be quite slow. And also, if there's text in them, they need to be quite slow for your learners to read them as well.
Yeah.
So, make them slow. I think so long as they're not flashy. There is recommended, I can't remember off the top of my head, there's a recommended, if you search online for recommended speed of a GIF for epilepsy, it will come up. Online program was asking me for
the frequency of 5 to 30 flashes per second is is likely to trigger seizures. So I think you need
so I think if you have like 1 slide per second, then you're okay.
Yeah.
Which I think you wouldn't want any faster than that anyway. You probably want 1 slide per 2 seconds, really, and be aware that if you can't read it in the time before it twitches, your students are probably got slower reading.
Definitely not going to read it in time.
So be aware of that.
Of course. Yeah. Oh, it's really interesting. So what just to give an example, what do you think is your most sort of the GIF you're most proud of, or the one that you think is most effective that you've created?
Probably that grammar one. The other ones were more kind of fun. Like I've got like a little magic wand with some stars coming out of it, and like a calendar that looks like it's moving and like the pages coming off. But those are kind of for fun rather than to have an English language teaching purpose. So I guess I'd love to do more grammar GIFs like that, and more visuals, like summarizing grammar and summarizing different pedagogy like dogma or language experience approach. Like if I could create lots of sketch notes with that, I would love that. But I kind of need someone to pay me to do it because otherwise it just won't happen.
Time. Yeah.
So if anyone wants to sponsor me to do that, get in touch.
Okay, yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, there's a lot of. I think I always use this phrase that I don't know where I first heard it, but the teachers generally are very ideas rich, but money poor
Yeah,
and time poor as well. So
yeah.
in other
Like I have
words,
yeah.
we have so many ideas like the one you've just said that would be great to have, but
Yeah,
actually you've got other things that you need to concentrate on because you need to
yeah,
make a living, or you don't have the time because
yeah.
of all the things that you're doing for work, etc. That
But yeah,
yeah,
yeah. If somebody comes along and offers to pay me for it, like for example, I've been meaning to make a sketch note on LGBTQ representation within materials writing in for English language teachers for years, just because it's a passion, something I'm passionate about. And
yeah,
then I've just never had time to do it. But then
yeah,
Peter Fooliger commissioned me to create one, which was perfect. And then I had it, I'd completed it within a week because somebody had given me the time or created the time for me to do it. So yeah, all these sketch note ideas that I have time for that you sometimes just need an extra push um, or an extra little bit of motivation to do.
of course,
Yeah.
definitely. Okay, but creating gifts is definitely quite easy for teachers to do and not that time consuming, or do you think it
Um,
actually would
I mean,
be quite
yeah, some. Yeah, I guess it's not really minimal preparation. That's definitely quite a lot
definitely
of
not?
preparation. If you're going to be, I think, create a GIF if it's something that you think will be used again and again and again in class.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's the key, isn't it?
yeah, it's going to take a lot longer. Yeah, anything like with animations, creating videos, that's not going to be minimal preparation because, well, it might be
Yeah,
minimal preparation if you do it and then it's finished and then you can just repeat it again and again as a online login type course.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
It's
it's more like prepare now and then relax in the future kind of preparation.
of course, yeah. So, what about the opposite to minimal preparation teaching? Have you ever fallen into the trap, or have you ever been sort of just very interested in something that you've spent a lot of time preparing something for class,
Oh,
and then you've realized, why did I spend 4 hours doing that activity
yeah.
that only took up 10 minutes of the class time? So, I
Well,
definitely have fallen into that trap.
yeah. Well, actually, that immediately springs to mind one of my observed diploma lessons,
All
to
right.
which I was aiming for. I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to do really, really well in this lesson. And I remember going to class, and so I created like maybe two texts, lots of activities to go alongside them. And I think that was my materials developer hat getting in the way of my teaching hat in a way. So I was
Yeah.
creating these beautiful materials. They looked great. They were like jigsaw readings. I'd cut bits up. And actually, I remember going to class, and one of my colleagues commented how much paper I had. I think I had like a whole ream of paper printed out. Like for a class of 20, I would like that's like 2 weeks' work that I'd prepared for this class. And obviously, I didn't get anywhere near through it. Thankfully, the person that was observing me said, "You changed your lesson plan from what you were intending to do, and there was lots of like classroom management, and so you passed the lesson, but you do not need anywhere near that quantity of materials." And that comes back to the diploma being about exploiting materials.
Yeah.
So if I had gone in with half of maybe one of those texts, like the first paragraph, I would probably have done really well because I would have exploited it and used it in many different ways. So yeah,
Yeah.
don't over prepare.
Definitely, there's a balance, isn't there? Too,
Yeah.
I think you always feel you need to have enough
Hmm.
ready to take advantage of the time because I think as a teacher, you always want to make the most of the time that you have with learners, but
Yeah.
you can definitely over prepare.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, for minimal preparation, it would be lovely to be able to think that you could go in and just be a dogma teacher every time. But I never ever felt confident enough to do that. I always had a few activities either on the computer saved or printed out that I took with me just in case. And then,
Yeah.
have backup plans.
I think a balance
Over prayer.
is
Don't under
probably is. I would imagine there aren't that many teachers who just go in to the class and wing it every single class.
Yeah.
Perhaps there are, but I wouldn't feel happy with that because I don't know. I feel like there needs to be some kind of preparation involved, at least some of the time, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. If not, if for nothing else other than for you to feel more confident that you definitely have a backup plan.
Yeah, or not even that, to feel like you're making it, that this actually has a direction and structure to it,
Yeah.
which you do want the learners to not just learn whatever comes up in class.
Yeah. But to
You
have some homework
expect
activities
to have,
prepared as well.
yeah, something that they feel like, or you feel like they're actually moving towards getting to a particular destination. I suppose it's a bit like, to bring it back to your traveling. You have you might well know where you're going. You said you're going to head north, so you're going to go to Peru, and you'll end up in Scotland for the summer next year. So you have that as a destination, but I'm sure you don't know at the moment how much time you're actually going to spend in Cusco, or how much time you'll spend around Machu Picchu, and a lot will depend on what you find when you get there, and the people you meet, etc., I suppose.
Yeah. We actually don't have, we're going to Atacama, and then after we go to Atacama, we have zero plans.
There we go.
Yes. So yeah, it depends. Really, we're just going to look for places
I think that's
that have lots of mountains to visit.
I think that's a great way to approach it. The traveling, because it leaves you open to take advantage of what you find, because you don't know until you go to a place what you're going to find there and what you're going to be interested in, and you need the freedom to be able to do that. I think having a kind of a freer approach to traveling as you have at the moment is always good, rather than, you go for a week to a place and you have everything mapped out. On Tuesday we're doing this, on Wednesday we're doing that, on Thursday we're doing that, and then you realize when you get there, we haven't got time to do what perhaps is the most interesting thing.
Yeah, and actually what I like about getting to places is, I think because we've been traveling now for about 6 months, we're finding that we're doing less and less of the touristy things.
Of
I've been in
course.
Cordoba now for maybe a month, and I've not been to one museum, because in reality I wouldn't go to museums in Glasgow unless I was on a class trip or with my nephew, my niece.
That's kind of it's kind of interesting, isn't it? It's like, I feel the same, when we first arrived in Mexico City just over 6 years ago. One of the first things we did was, like, we went to see things, we went to see places. We went and checked out the most sort of emblematic museums or landmarks and stuff. And now it's very rare that I would actually go and do that. I do need to kind of remind myself that there are things that I haven't seen yet that I would actually like to see. If I'm going to be leaving Mexico City, I don't want to think, I've only got a month left, I should go and see these things, which has happened in other places I've lived.
Yeah,
and
like
I think
in
it's
Mendoza, the best thing I did was one of the really cool things that I did was go into a ceramics class. So I had 2 days of ceramics, which was partly for practicing my Spanish, because I didn't want to do any more Spanish language classes of grammar, etc. I just wanted to be speaking it. So that was great. And
Yeah. No, definitely. One of the things I decided to do recently, because I realized I wasn't really connecting much with Mexican culture, and I wasn't reading in Spanish, which is something I used to do, and kind of got out the habit of it. So I signed up for a course on literatura fantástica taught in Spanish. It's been meeting every Friday for a month, and we all end up having to write a short story in Spanish. So I've really pushed myself and have been reading lots of fabulous short stories in Spanish and reconnected with Spanish literature, but also really had to kind of push myself to write in Spanish as well. So that's been really rewarding.
You'll
And
need
now
to
it's
send me those short stories. I'm looking for inspiration for books to read in Spanish.
well, I can share. A lot of these are in the public domain, and they're fantastic.
Great.
And they're kind of literatura fantástica in Spanish is a bit like magic realism.
Oh, nice! That's one of my favorites. Cool.
But the big difference is magic realism is when the reality, nobody bats an eyelid if someone opens their mouth and a bird flies out, for example, because that's just the way things are in the place, in the world of the text. This, which the translation into English is actually, it's fantastique, the French word literature. This is different because people do get freaked out by things that happen that are out of the ordinary. But things that happen, things that are out of the ordinary do happen, and they're never explained.
Okay.
So that's a kind of interesting genre. It's like Julio Cortázar and Cortázar and others like him, basically. So I'll share some stuff if you're interested.
Great, please do. I've been quite proud of myself. I just read The Alchemist in Spanish and
fantastic!
Spanish. And just trying to look for other ways of, or like I would always tell my students to get out and about and use their English by, for example, doing ceramics classes or volunteering or reading books in English or graded readers. So now I'm kind of taking all those advice for learning Spanish as well. So finding graded readers.
So if you've read The Alchemist, then you'll want to do the Camino de Santiago next.
Oh, I wanted to do that for years anyway. But yeah, I'm until a year for that.
Yeah, well, when you're in Scotland, you can make it over to to there. I've done it twice actually. I've done it once by bicycle from Pamplona with a friend, and then just before I got married, I did a week walking into. I got married in Santiago de Compostela, so I walked into Santiago de Compostela with a friend, and that was the only stag do that I had.
Okay,
we just walked into Santiago, and that was fabulous. And my family and friends were all waiting for us when we arrived, so that was great.
Nice.
So I recommend it. Emily, we've run out of time.
It's been great chatting to you.
It's been great chatting to you as well, and I hope you make it to Mexico so we can meet in person.
I hope so too, and then we can stand in a 2-hour queue for those tacos.
Well, we'll definitely go if you come here and you're interested. We'll go to that taco place. I'll wait until then because I'm sure the queue time will be down to maybe 20 minutes by the time.
Yeah, maybe it won't be the flavor of the month.
So if you do come up here, then definitely let's meet up and do something. It would be lovely to actually meet you in person.
Great, that'd be wonderful.
Okay, so thanks very much, Emily, and enjoy the rest of your time in Argentina.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Empowering education with Easy for You, where innovation meets accessibility. Our subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionizes the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. We're not just providing tools, we're shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy for You, transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easy4u.school.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MAT leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
So that brings us to the end of today's Twilight Show. Many thanks to today's special guest, Emily Bryson, and all of you who joined us live. And so that's it from me. There are Teachers Talk radio shows all week on all manner of interesting topics. So please listen in live or to the recordings. And I hope you will join me again next week with another guest at the same time. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.